Yes, indeed. Oh, hello there. I didn't notice you. I normally don't pay much attention to peasants, you see. I am what you would call fancy. I do not indulge in the simple, childish pleasures of the plebeian creatures who exist below me. In fact, I was just engaging in the high-end pleasures I believe you people call video game. Of course, we do not call them that ourselves, but the word we use cannot be understood in a small human's tongue like yours. But the word would be but do not confuse yourself. I do not partake in your insignificant soiree of mediocre garbage. I see you have been playing that tripe Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yes, well, I suppose it could be considered fun to an unrefined palate, but I would prefer a high-end dish like this one. Chrono Trigger, yes, it has turn-based combat, something you were too stupid to understand, so they had to change it to suit your lack of taste. Oh dear, I see you are playing that foolish joke of an entertainment piece, Sonic Frontiers. Yes, your type would ignore obvious flaws in order to claim something was ambitious. Meanwhile, as you can see, I am playing the utter classic, fancy game, Sonic Adventure 2. Its aged elements not affecting a wise gentleman like me, although I suppose you'd call it a bit drab these days. Wouldn't you, you silly little thing? You probably wish it had a Battle Royale mode, don't you, you stupid fuck? Call of Duty? Are you serious? My standards are far too high. Although I suppose you'd have never heard of this little classic known as Half-Life 1. I suppose its visuals and occasional archaic design philosophy make it not to your liking, eh? I should have known a simpleton like you wouldn't understand quality. Oh my goodness, you really are a drab piece of work, aren't you? I believe my wise, rich, fancy eyes have spotted Fire Emblem 3 houses. Utterly disgraceful. Constantly holding your hand through an overly long excuse of a turn-based tactical role-playing game. You wouldn't have survived in my trenches of no turn wheel, guaranteed permadeath, class-specific promotion items, and of course save states and cheat codes in order to ignore all of that. What is that? You wish to know of what I am playing? Well, it just so happens to be a game much too fancy for you. You simply wouldn't get it. You would call me an elitist. You would say, its maps are too large. My foot units are lagging behind. Arden isn't the best unit in the game. Garbage like that. Okay, you silly little garbage-dwelling maggot. I suppose you've earned a lesson on it. Welcome to Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. Wait, where are you going? Fire Emblem fans are a fickle bunch. We never know what we want, we complain when we get what we want, and we pretend that we love it when the game has really annoying and archaic mechanics that constantly kick us in the dick. And then when a well thought out, impeccably designed game with smart and well explained mechanics comes to us,
well, that one sucks balls because it's not a very good sequel to Three Houses, and look at its art style.
But we also really like to pretend that games that we've never played are the peak of Fire Emblem's design. Don't lie to me, you big idiot. You've never played Thracia 776. You probably don't even know how many door keys you need per chapter, moron. You're whining at me for liking FE12. Are you serious? Did you ever try to do a hard 50 Iron Man reverse quadruple backflip, no Pala, Armor Knight, Chris, deathmatch challenge run? Probably not, because you probably didn't even know that that's how the game was meant to be played. And on both sides of the aisle, you've got dumbasses arguing about how Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War is both the best and the worst video game ever made. And what's crazy is I guarantee you most of them haven't played the game. At most, they've watched a Let's Play or played a couple maps, but unlike you fool, I've not only played this game, I've played it 5 times. Okay, more like one half of the game 5 times, the other half 2 times. We'll get to it. So there was no one more qualified than me to tell you how you should feel about this game. So after 2 different intros and no thesis statement whatsoever, let me tell you why you should dislike Genealogy of the Holy War, and then why you also just don't get it and I'm smarter than you and it's actually a really good game. Now, I'll make a few things clear right now. For one, I do genuinely like this game, and obviously I'm going to talk about why and how as we go, but I think this game is incredibly unique and original even today.
And in a lot of places, it's still uncontested.
However, I also understand that especially for first timers, this game can feel like a mess. It not only doesn't play like most other Fire Emblems, but at times it can feel boring, a bit like a slog, and at other times just frustrating. And that's understandable, but before we get into the how, let's take a quick trip into the why. Get it? Because the why is an actual place. As mentioned in my Binding Blade video, and nowhere else on the entire internet, Fire Emblem was originally directed by game designer Shozo Kaga. He's not only the father of Fire Emblem, but also this style of tactics games, and he is very highly celebrated by Fire Emblem fans for it. However, I feel like to call him the main influence in Fire Emblem is kind of an exaggeration. Obviously, he created the series, so no matter what, his influence is all over it. However, Fire Emblem, since the Game Boy Advance era, has had a formula that's been added to and adjusted over the years, but never fully changed or messed with. That's not a bad thing, of course, but it's also not what Shozo Kaga ever did with the series. See, after Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light establish a framework, Gaiden comes along and completely gets rid of it. We don't go map to map anymore. Now there's dungeon crawling, there's 2 different parties, and each class can promote into further classes, unlike the original in which promotions were only for a couple of classes and only once per. It's also much more story focused. There's an overworld, there's no more full inventories. This is what Fire Emblem is now. Except it's not, you dumb fuck, because Mystery of the Emblem is literally the first game again, plus another game stacked onto it, and it refines that original formula from the first game, which obviously means the series is a Mario 3 situation. 2 was a little off, but 3 is back to what we were looking for, and I'm just kidding, you loser! Genealogy of the Holy War is a continent-spanning, story-focused war epic where maps are massive, there's only 11 chapters, and they all will take multiple hours. Every unit has a unique inventory and money. Grinding is different. Promotions are different. They can get married. They have individual bank accounts, and everything is totally, utterly, and completely different besides the main moving and combat. And then Thracia goes back to that old formula with some new additions. Kaga isn't the type of director to make the same game twice in a row, which means a lot of his games are tossing new things at the wall that aren't guaranteed to stick. And Fire Emblem 4 really feels like he put every idea he had for a full-scale war story into a game without 100% realizing how early playthroughs would go. However, it's because of that grand scale and unique unit customization and options that Genealogy still stands out. Would I say it's Kaga's magnum opus? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. It's not Berwick Saga. But it is something entirely different from the rest of the series. And I think what can seem intimidating about it is that you can't expect it to be familiar. And in that, it can feel unwelcoming. But it's in understanding the game and why it is the way it is that really opens your eyes to its quality. So let's dive into that. Now, this is normally where I would explain how I'm going to talk about the gameplay or the presentation and then get into the story. However, I think with this game, that's a little difficult. See, the thing about Genealogy that really sets it apart from the rest of the series, and apart from a lot of other RPGs, is how much it dedicates itself to making sure its gameplay and story are always chained together. One is always holding the other up, and they always benefit one another. You remember how in my Engage video, I mentioned that I love how many chapters of that game would reflect what's happening in the story?
That's something Fire Emblem does occasionally.
Like how in Radiant Dawn, the Dawn Brigade is a ragtag group of untrained young rebels, so in gameplay, you're constantly at a disadvantage. Or in Three Houses, the way Crest can affect gameplay to make some units better than others. That's just about every mechanic in this game. So what I'm going to do is I will attempt to go over both gameplay and the story at the same time and how one affects the other. Will I fail? Yeah, but I'm still gonna give it a shot. So let's go over the first thing that people will warn you about. And you'll notice it immediately when first playing FE4. Holy shit, these maps. Oh my god. What is this? They are gigantic, the biggest in the series, and you will have to go through the entirety of all of them. No other Fire Emblem game has attempted this since, and honestly, I doubt they ever will again. How can you even manage to make an enjoyable experience going through these? I've played Path of Radiance and Binding Blade, and those maps can be so tedious just slowly trudging along. How do you make this fun? Well, simple. Don't treat it like a normal Fire Emblem map. Yes, they are massive, but they aren't just places to move around your pieces. It's not a game game board, it's a country, one for you to explore and in the end, conquer. You're not just going from point A to B, you're making a pit stop to E, then after getting point C, more than likely your units at J and H are moving to the final point of L. Make sense? Fuck you, no it doesn't. What I mean is, these maps are taken in chunks and small quests. Your goal at the start isn't to rush to the end of the map, it's to go to this castle only about a third of the way through it. Oh geez, a village with an important item is under attack, and oh my god, an enemy army is approaching as well. However, it will always be in this small chunk, its own condensed map in a way that you could comfortably take down without stressing about the rest of the continent. However, if you do want to plan ahead a bit, the game will reward you. For example, I know that in certain areas bridges will be built or certain enemies will spawn after I seize a current objective. So I'm going to move some of my units over to that area to immediately set up a defensive line or an offensive stronghold so I can rush to the next objective. While your long game isn't something you truly need to be focused on, especially when there will already be more than enough for your units to do before seizing a castle, planning a little bit ahead can make the game's pace heavily improve, which is something we'll get into soon. But playing smart, knowing that you're going to need units in certain places or the order in which you're seizing the points will aid in how comfortable your journey is, which applies to a lot of the game. And the thing is, these large maps not only are a fun way to experience Fire Emblem, but they also add to the rest of what the game is doing. The reason for this is twofold. One, it allows the game to have these massive sprawling maps that make it feel like your army is getting stronger as you conquer more territories, while also allowing you to feel like a genius when you're planning out that long game. But even better, it accentuates the game's storytelling. See, the base summary of this game's story is that Sigurd starts by rushing out of his home territory in order to defend it from attacking brigands. However, those brigands were sent by another royal family and country, so Sigurd is forced to come knocking at their door since they refuse to stop attacking and pillaging, made even worse by the fact that they've done shit like kidnapping Idane, the daughter of another noble. This leads into more battles within that large territory, where more characters from friendly kingdoms join you. The maps aren't flat, they're constantly changing. As a character like Jamp sees that his brothers have begun fighting a war for no reason, he defects, hoping to help Sigurd and eventually enact change. It also means that no enemy reinforcements are truly random. A lot of the time throughout the map, certain characters and bosses get built up to, waiting in the wings, and then once that castle is seized, or a character is recruited, or what have you, boom, that boss shows up, and you need to brace yourself for a potential interruption. It also means that as the story advances, the maps change. Not just stuff like bridges being built or hills being leveled, characters leave, side characters speak to you, sometimes enemies will turn on each other, and you don't need a long cutscene or a chapter break for it to happen. Instead, it just happens on the map. A great example of this is Eldigan. Eldigan is a character that really feels like he's going to join your army. He's someone who's allowing Sigurd to fight his war as long as things eventually settle down. But as it rages on and things don't change and all Sigurd can say is, "I'm sorry, this is just how it is," he gets fed up and engages you with his own platoon. But you can talk him down, and if you do, he'll retreat, try to call off the men, but will immediately be beheaded for his trouble. All of this happens during the chapter. You could be in the middle of a fight, a castle siege, hell, you could be in a town grinding the arena. It doesn't matter. But that's how this war is. Whether you're in the middle of a fight or not, political conflicts will constantly be happening. Other parties will be tossing hats in and out of the ring, and it can be chaotic. However, I will say this fantastic cohesion does come with caveats. I'm not going to pretend it's all fantastic, and here's where I'm going to piss and moan a bit, while also defending a few parts. First off, despite how amazing the developments can be, how much fun going from castle to castle watching the story unfold is, there is still going to be downtime, and quite a bit of it. Enemy armies aren't unlimited, and eventually your units will need to walk through large swaths of land with nothing to do to keep pushing forward. Now, this can aid the story. There's multiple moments like chapters 4 and 5 where Sigurd and his army are beginning to be disillusioned. They've been at this war for years. What started as a small conflict ballooned into a world at war, and they're sick of it, literally being called traitors by their own countries. So these long trudges through snow and deserts do wonders for enveloping you in that empty feeling. However, it's also boring as fuck. It's 5+ turns of click, go there, click, now you go there. Thank God for speed up. We'll get to this soon, but if you haven't noticed the obvious, I absolutely spam speed up. One, because I hate you and I want your viewing experience to be an uncomfortably fast visual mess of overstimulation, but also because this shit can take a while. And of course, the meme of this game. Some units just can't make the journey as well as others. Fire Emblem has always had a bias towards mounted units. They have the most important advantage in the series, that being extended movement. And while some games have tried to balance them, Thracia and Radiant Dawn just trying to make it so they can't move half the time, and Engage actually successfully balancing movement as a whole, this game has an obvious bias towards them, and it doesn't do a ton to lessen the blow. When there's no action, might as well use a mounted unit. They'll get me where I need to be faster. When there is action, well, the mounted units got there first. Sorry, stragglers. It just doesn't feel like the game really gave a second thought to most of them. Like, yeah, they have pretty crazy combat potential, but look at any optimal play and you just shouldn't use them. Except, here's the thing. With all due respect to people playing this game at the highest level, low turn counts, fastest runs, whatever, playing with only mounted units is lame. They all have these generic animations where they wander over and just But look at Sword Masters, they're like, wah! Oh my god, Jomp just snipes people from across the room. Arden is unabashedly the best unit in the game. He just plugs up holes and he never dies. Everyone likes him for a reason. I'm just saying, playing optimal is incredibly boring. It's just putting Sigurd in front of everyone. Maybe having other mounted units back him up with chip damage. Whoopee. I can't stand playing like this. And the way the game designs foot units is actually kind of fun. Again, take a look at Jomp. He starts with a killer bow. That's his killer bow. He'll use it to kill your units, and then once you get him, he tears through everything. Meanwhile, on a horse, you have Meteor. He's a bow unit, he can get a few kills. I mean, it'll take him a few turns, and if he gets hit, yeah, he'll die instantly, but I mean, he's on a horse. So, which unit's better? Meteor, because the horse. If you push all units forward full force, he'll get there first, and Jomp will miss out. But I don't want to do that. I want to use these insane damage dealers. Are you seriously going to tell me that Lewin isn't good enough because he's not on a horse, when meanwhile, he can straight up one-shot any enemy in the game with Forseti the second you get it? Bridget also gets a holy weapon. Ira gets a brave blade. They will be out damaging and outperforming most horse units without any trouble. All you have to do is change how you play, like I do. And no, I don't mean slow down, though that can also be fun. I do that too. What I mean is, if you pay attention to the objective and play smart, your foot units will have things to do. Healers don't get much money, so buying new staffs is tough, but Edain gets a warp staff super early, meaning while she's with other foot units, she can easily get them from place to place and keep them in the fight. Maps tend to have objectives both close and far, so send the mounted units far away and allow the foot units to take care of business closer to home. These massive maps have tons of side objectives, and the game also gives you a four-way dancer who is also foot-locked. Your foot-locked units will always have things to do, and they are fun to use. So unironically, if you are like me and you have fun using these units, don't sell that killer bow to Midir. Leave it on Jomp. Let him go crazy. Yes, Midir will be a much worse combat unit due to the lack of it, but maybe if he sucks at combat, I'd rather give Jomp the crutch of letting him catch up than Meteor the crutch that makes him slightly less dull to have. You can deploy literally every unit in your army at all times. You really don't have to choose who's best, because you get everyone. So please, if you find it enjoyable to use these units like I do, then use them and have fun. Don't let anyone tell you you're playing the game wrong. And those weapons are also just the tip of the iceberg. Each unit is also unique in what exactly you want to do. Again, this game wants to be a little closer to actual war, and when you're in war, you're not always on the battlefield. There's downtime, there's time to train, and time to stock yourself and repair weapons. The reason things like the killer bow are Jomp's or the brave sword is Ira's is because of how the game handles each individual unit. Each one has their own wallet, meaning you can't use massive amounts of cash to stack out a couple units. Each weapon can also be indefinitely repaired, meaning if a unit is really great with a weapon, they don't need to give it up. This also gives thieves, a unit group I personally hate in this game, a decent niche. They're also footlocked and can barely fight. However, if you attack someone, they'll take their gold and can hand it out to any other unit. And while yes, I can give a worse unit a better weapon through trading gold, selling it to the pawn shop, and then having a character buy that item through the pawn shop, I would rather spend all that money on infinite warp staffs. Fuck Midir. It encourages you to let units enjoy their niches and specific weapons, and while yes, you can trade them away, the game very carefully gives units specific weapons that benefit them. And I thought pretentious people like us encourage people to play the game the way the developers
developers intended.
And hey, that includes abusing what they've given us to abuse, which means the arena is always going to be as much free EXP as I can get. You can't die, so you might as well spend the first 30 minutes of every map going in and out with every unit. Thank God for speed up. And again, keeping those good items on their starting characters gives them massive advantages in the arena, meaning that even if they miss out on a battle or two, EXP wise, they can keep up. This all gives a much more interesting focus on item management and how it will affect each individual unit and when that unit can actually have the items they might need, which is added onto even more by enemies with exclusive items because we're keeping this item train rolling. Many boss enemies have rare, very powerful items on them that the person who gets the kill gets to keep. Same with villages. So while yes, you could allow Sigurd, the lord of the game and the massive tank that overruns everything, to get all of these weapons, maybe I want that skill ring to go on Alec or Noish so they can do more damage while having movement advantages. Maybe I don't want to do a bunch of pawn shop trades to get the magic ring onto Azel, but to get Azel to kill that guy requires smart play. The most notorious is probably the Paragon ring, a ring that doubles experience game and is incredibly expensive in the shop in order to keep you from constantly passing it around. The best units for it are characters like Azel, because when he promotes he gets a mount, and Lachesis, because when she promotes she gets a mount, insane stats, and is one of the best units in part 1. However, she blows early on and she needs those levels quick. So if you play smart, can get the boss to low enough HP and then just time that one hit perfectly, you can get a promoted Lachesis by the end of the chapter and an insane advantage. I love this. Yes, it's more complicated than standard trading. It can take a lot more time and more complicated thinking, but the reward is so fun. I love how much this game encourages individual unit builds and make you want to get those advantages. However,
This does come with another issue.
and this one is hard to avoid on the first run. You won't know you should have checked that unit for an item. You won't know what village has the skill or speed ring. And you won't know a lot of where these great items are. And to be fair, I get that for certain moments. Quan is a fantastic mounted unit, one of the best. And he can get an insane weapon called the Gay Bulge, which is actually what I'm called by certain circles of people. But you can only get it through one specific talk conversation at one specific time, which you wouldn't know about without checking a specific menu during that exact time, or using a guide. Lex is a pretty mid unit. He's got a mount, so he's fine, and he's pretty much the only axe unit you'll be using until Arden promotes and replaces the entire army, but he can't normally double and he misses constantly. So his Brave Axe is a fantastic fit to him. So make sure you go over to the specific spot or you'll completely miss out on the weapon for the whole game. Oops. Same with the Pursuit Ring. Oh, sorry. Arden's Pursuit Ring, because it is his. Some units can't double, and Arden is one of those units. So you need it to gain the Pursuit skill, and if you want it, you'll need to know beforehand where you're supposed to go. I'll go deeper into this soon, but I'm sure you're starting to see a pattern of this game's worst habit. But again, this heavily is aided by the game's story. Like most Fire Emblem games, this game is about a ragtag army of people from different backgrounds, countries, and history. However, back during the Kaga era, it was kind of inconsistent if these characters would have, well, character. Gaiden tried, but was limited due to its console. Many characters had arcs and personalities, but just as many didn't. Meanwhile here, despite the lack of support conversations, there's plenty of conversations between recruits, all of them having very defined backstories and reasons to fight, and for the first time, I feel like everyone can have a very good reason for a character to be their favorite, except for Hannibal. We'll get to it. So, to complement that, each character also brings their own unique combat prowess and weapons, and they feel even more defined by them. Sigurd in the story is seen, at least at first, as an incredible, powerful crusader and liberator, so in gameplay, he is an absolutely unstoppable force, having some of the best skills in the game, and his silver sword, part of what makes him so good, is a gift from Arvis, someone who simultaneously will seem suspicious but also maybe on your side. It emphasizes to us why he trusts Arvis. The reason he's so strong is partially linked to Arvis, so we aren't always sure how to feel about him. Same with unique skill. These are not only powerful in battle but give the characters a reason to be in the army. Alec can double, Noish can crit, as if they're each taking small things from training with Sigurd, who can do both. And this plot relevance is even more accentuated with Holy Blood. Holy Blood is a
major deal in FE4 in its world. It means that a character is a descendant from Crusaders, basically gods, and characters with it have immediate advantages over those who don't, and they can also wield holy weapons, the absolute best weapons in the game. And yes, it is like Crest from Three Houses, shut up. If you add to that Gen 2, which I am going to touch on very soon, I promise, characters who were paired in Gen 1 can pass on Holy Blood to Gen 2 units. It's like we're naturally trying to chase the same eugenics many of the high-end families of Yggdrasil are as well, which as fucked as that is, does mean another aspect of the game world is used in its gameplay. This was the first FE game to really push that every character is unique, so I love that it also reflects that in its gameplay and story. Along with all of that, the game really hones in on something that other games in the series tend to not focus as hard on, which is pure character growth. Yes, in every game you'll take a group of soldiers, level them up, promote them, and keep pushing forward. However, here, I feel like that's even more emphasized. See, this game takes place over multiple years, even before its time skip. After chapter 1, 6 months pass before Sigurd has to march again to stop more rebellions and fights, and more time goes as you continue playing. Characters fall in love, they have children, and they'll talk about their lives outside of the war with each other. But what I love is that because you're slowly leveling up over these long battles, it makes promotions and new skills feel like they were worked towards by the characters over all of these years of war. And obviously other games in the series acknowledge the passage of time, but honestly I think this one does it best because you don't just see a calendar change. You're involved enough to feel like you experience that time with these characters, and when they're not at war, you feel a short sense of rest that gets immediately interrupted. Promotions can only be done at level 20, although I will say I hate that you have to do it at your home base. It gets really annoying the longer it goes, and if you like it, I'm sorry, but you're a lesser human. But after 50 kills, every unit will get the ability critical. Yes, you can't crit without it. Not only that, but with 100 kills, weapons gain 50% crit. I love this because you get the feeling that your character has really grown, mastering their weapons in combat as the years of war continue on. As the war gets worse, your characters get more used to it, and the difficulty of the game begins to drop a bit. Not because the game is easy necessarily, it is, but it's because your units are getting more weathered and prepared. And that's another complaint I don't really get. Now, Choops, a much better YouTuber, has covered this, but I'm going to touch on it as well. I like how imbalanced this game is. Yes, certain units and weapons just roll over enemies, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. The game isn't built to be balanced. It's using these units to tell a story, and if stuff like Holy Blood, rare weapons, and certain characters weren't so useful or strong, they wouldn't match how the story portrays them. So yes, I am happy Sigurd is busted. I love Holy Blood, and rings, and high-end weapons, because that's the world the characters live in. And speaking of which, I really want to dig into why this game's world is so important. This game cares about its world more than basically any other Fire Emblem game. Before it starts, we get a list of important historical events, so that if they're mentioned later, we at least have a little context. We get short explanations of things like the Cult of Lopter, what happened to the certain Crusaders. It makes it so plot twists, character reveals, and kingdom situations aren't constantly just being thrown at us, and we can naturally take in the changes. Yggdrasil isn't just another setting, it's a constantly changing continent where different countries change allegiances, rise and fall. It makes it so that when it becomes an empire later on, it hits a lot harder. We've traveled to these countries, we know how they're governed, and now it's all changed. And it's partially our fault. It also aids in making Lopter feel more interesting than just another dragon-worshipping cult. The Lopterians are a group of people so scorned by the world that the existence of Lopter blood is limited to one person at all time. Anymore, and they will be executed or pushed to live in a forest forever. And instead of that feeling forced or pure evil, we're told and shown that most people who worship Lopter used to just be desperate for any sort of salvation, and that's been corrupted into what it is now. It also makes them pulling strings feel much more tragic for the actual countries. We see the royal families of them, and while yes, some are objectively evil, some are under the pretense that they're being conquered for no real reason, or that they need to aid neighboring countries from invasion. Yes, we know the truth, but because the game has built such a solid foundation for the world, we understand the tragedy of what's happening and that Sigurd is just another cog in the machine. That's also a fantastic part of the story as well. See, in almost every Fire Emblem game, we're the objective good. Every country we take over is seen positively by everyone except for the pure evil people. We are epic, we're saviors, and here it's mostly similar. After all, the first attack was on us, and the rest of Sigurd's battles are simply trying to get things under control again. Like, look, we need to be civil, but now we're getting threatened again, so we'll conquer these guys, but let them stay in power. Okay, never mind, we can't do that, we gotta conquer these guys too. And it keeps piling up until when someone is told Sigurd is a conqueror or a warmonger, though they're wrong, you understand why a normal person might might agree. When he gets betrayed and is basically charged with treason, we disagree, but we can see why it's happening. It also really makes you feel for these characters. Sigurd and Deirdre aren't supposed to fall in love, but god damn it, Sigurd is always mogging. You might as well name him Sigmar. So of course Deirdre does fall for it, but then she gets kidnapped because this was all part of a plan they never knew about. As the war finally winds down and Sigurd is just fighting to get home, he's basically accepted he and his army will probably die. The army members will have conversations with their spouses telling them that their place is on the battlefield, but if they can run, that they should. You get this feeling of everything just being for nothing. Juan and Ethlin, two of the most useful units in the game, and some that have been the most loyal to Sigurd, are killed in gameplay and you can't stop it. It's more emphasis on what I said earlier. The game won't pause to show you a cutscene between chapters. It's going to make you endure what the characters do, and a lot of time give you more knowledge than what the characters have. I also love when the enemy switches to your side near the end. You just saw Arvis planning something. He's stolen Deirdre from Sigurd, and he's the one telling the army to turn, so what is he going to do? The feeling of acceptance of the end is still kind of there, but now it's a general uneasiness, and then you get to the worst kept secret in the entire Fire Emblem series. At the end of the Battle of Valhalla, Sigurd comes home only to be cucked by Arvis, and he and most of his army are murdered by meteor showers. It is the most famous scene in the game, and one of the most famous in the series. And it's not just shocking to be shocking, because it was built up to in both gameplay and story. It's not just Sigurd who was tricked. In a way, the player was also tricked by Arvis, and we failed. I really wish this game came out in the States, because I know this would be a Final Fantasy VI Kefka wins of its time, and would be remembered the same way. It is so powerful, and yet the game keeps going, and gets honestly quite a bit worse. Okay, look, before anyone gets too upset, I do like part 2 of this game. I think it's incredible that a game on the Super Nintendo has the idea of having a starting cast and then another cast of their children cleaning up a mess they left behind 17 years later. And I like a lot of these characters, and the gameplay still has the same qualities as part 1. However, I feel overall it's just weaker in a lot of ways. Just to summarize my feelings a bit, I have played part 1 5 times now. I've played part 2 twice. Now, it might be because I have a lot more experience with part 1 and therefore can have more fun with it, but part 2 just doesn't have the punch that part 1 does. It's still good, not as unique or great as part 1, and it is helped a lot by its concept and use of child units. It's just lesser to me, and now I'm going to say why. So, part 2 on paper just seems like more of the game. Same map ideas, same character classes, just new characters starting from level 1. However, I think the overall framing of the game gets a lot weaker, and the best parts of it completely rely on part 1 to hold them up. Here's the thing. Part 1 isn't the deepest thing in the world, but it's much more complex than what Fire Emblem normally is. It's not as simple as good versus evil. The individual kingdoms have their own agendas, sometimes as simple as defending their homeland. Not everyone you kill is pure evil, and your actions, while for the best, aren't entirely good. People talk about Fire Emblem being morally gray, and to me, it's usually not. Characters can be, but the overall plots aren't. But here, it is morally gray, and can get exceptionally dark. The main villain's goals are to set Arvis and Deirdre up into an incestuous relationship so that a pure-blood Laptarian will be born. Your entire group dies, and those who don't are either racked with PTSD, or in horrid conditions until they die from the misery. That's fucked up. However, part 2 kind of stops with that. It has its moments and keeps that tone at times, but for the most part, it becomes a good versus evil traditional Fire Emblem story. There's nobody who questions that what Seliph is doing is correct. Basically, every country is now run by evil dictators and aristocrats, or cultists, so nobody is going to complain when you topple them. The villain is someone possessed by an evil dragon who is unequivocally evil. There is literally no humanity in him. He does a thing called child hunts. However, what it does incredible work with is Arvis. Arvis, despite murdering Sigurd, was a benevolent and kind ruler. Despite keeping the country as one and ruling as emperor, he cares for those under him. He is incredibly respected for his first few years. Eventually, his reign turns sour, and we figure as players that's because he showed his true colors again. He went back to part 1 Arvis, who was completely evil. But the twist is, no, he's just become a puppet now. He already was before, but now the strings are so strong he can't resist them and be a kind ruler anymore. He was broken by Deirdre's death and is basically waiting to die, but Julius, his own son, won't let him. Arvis is the highlight of part 2. He goes from evil mastermind to just broken man who wish he would have done differently. We see he and Sigurd weren't too different in how they led and ruled. It's just that Sigurd wouldn't stoop as low as Arvis. Part 2 isn't as dark as part 1, but the fact that there are literal, as I said, child hunts, kind of tells you the horrid state the world is in. And to see that the villain of part 1 really did try to stop it is tragic and makes putting him down a bit bittersweet. But that sounds amazing. Even if it's just good boy versus bad boy, that's plenty interesting. What's the problem? Well, the problem is everything else is just less interesting. You get conflicted characters occasionally, but the options for them are either help objective evil who's blackmailing them or don't. Like Hannibal. His entire motivation is to save his son, but I always wondered why he's even still with Thracia at that point if he's so honorable. And he really doesn't have much to say about it. It doesn't help that he's literally the worst unit in the game. In this run through, I killed him when I wasn't looking and didn't realize it. But he's not the only one. Most of this cast doesn't have a lot to say, and though it can't really be helped, it's kind of disappointing. See, most units in part 2 aren't guaranteed to you. The parents could have died, or the parent might not have married anyone, so you could get these units that I'm using or replacement ones instead. And while the child units are absolutely fun to use, they have incredibly inflated growths and potentially crazy skill combinations along with passed down holy blood. As characters, they're a lot weaker than most of part 1. Let me give you an example. Bridget is a noble who was kidnapped by pirates when she was young. She had holy blood, which meant she was worth a ton of money. However, the ransom never happened, and she eventually became a pirate herself, using her enhanced power to rob and pillage, until she finally met up with her long-lost sister Edain, who reminded her of her past and gifted her the legendary bow Eufel. Now in part 2, this is Feebale. His story is that he is Bridget's son. See what I mean? These characters do have good conversations, but it's rare they go any farther than, oh wow, you're my sibling and we sure do miss our parents. And that's kind of sad, because these characters are literally picking up the scraps left by their parents and continuing the crusade. But they don't feel as fully fledged out as they could have been because they might not exist in your playthrough. Now, obviously there's exceptions. Characters like Shannon, Leaf, Seliph, Eris, and Altana are all guaranteed to show up, and they're all legitimately fascinating. I love that Seliph is so kind that he generally feels for the Laptarians but knows what has to be done. I love him learning that everything his father did wasn't perfect, yet him still being willing to take up the image that Sigurd once had. I love Leaf and Altina trying to put their lives back together after the hell they endured. I love Eris making up for the mistakes of his country's past, basically being the friend to Seliph that Eldigan wished he could have been to Sigurd. I also love the mechanics that come with these units, how you can inherit some of the best weapons in the game with the right romantic pairing. It's how I got Seliph to start with a Paragon ring so that he could promote early, because I really miss Sigurd for that one map where Seliph didn't have his horse. These characters are all great in concept, and they're all very fun units to use. In part 1, you had pretty low growth, something Kage games have in common, but due to sums or math or whatever comes with child units, these guys are monsters with insane growth. But in the end, the way I see a lot of part 2 units, child or not, is just, oh, it's the part 1 guy again. Seliph is Sigurd again. Fee is Aranis. Sed is Ewan, which means Forseti spam. But as fun as they are, the only difference I can find a lot of the time between Lex and Lester is that Lester died because I was too lazy to reset. I also feel like the map design of part 2 is just a little worse. It's not awful by any means and still has a lot of the great stuff part 1 did, but the maps get a lot more linear, a lot less unique ways to traverse, and a lot more moving in straight line. The bosses can also get really annoying. I pray for you didn't miss out on the legendary weapons, because certain bosses can basically only be hurt by them. You'll have to deal with constant sleep staves, basically making half your team useless for upwards of 5 turns. You'll have to try to keep Hannibal from killing himself if you want his dumbass son, who I didn't get, so he probably got executed. The endgame basically spams you with these constant irritating staves, weird enemy placements, super tanky bosses that can one-shot you in return, and tons of bolting spells targeting what feels like random units, meaning you could get lucky or you could get fucked over. This is actually a problem the game shares with basically every other Kaga Fire Emblem, in that he has a really weird way of balancing difficulty. See, in Fire Emblem, difficulty can come from a lot of places. Excess of strong enemies, lack of resources, expecting you to play well, or just inflated stats on the hardest modes. But in Kaga games, there's no difficulty select, and the games tend to be a little wonky in terms of their difficulty. It's what I would call difficulty spikes, where you'll think you're safe or have a good strategy and then, oops! The enemy had something you weren't prepared for, or you forgot a mechanic, and you ate shit. Thracia is the main culprit of these, and it's notorious for it, but I think they're more irritating here. The reason for that being, this game is not that difficult. You have some incredibly powerful units. Sigurd and Seliph need very little to steamroll most enemies, and you have so many unique tools that planning your strategy is normally just deciding who to take out on your phase and where it's safest to place units in the enemy phase. However, the game will randomly just spring up with bullshit, like I mentioned, and then you're left sighing because you couldn't see it coming. coming. And yes, the game has a safeguard. You can make a save file literally every turn, and of course nowadays we have save states, but here's the thing. Even if you're not using every unit at your disposal, you will still have so many units to move back into place just to mitigate that one tiny mistake. Every turn in this game can legitimately take around double the time a turn would take in other Fire Emblem. So those weird difficult moments that blindside you mean that you're wasting so much more time moving everyone back into place. And this is even worse when recruiting. There's stupid fucking piece of shit garbage Hannibal, like I said, but then in part 1 there's Beowulf, who's a really great unit. After all, look at that thing. But the constant weird repositioning I have to do in order to keep him from killing himself really grinds my gears. These spikes though do sometimes work in the game's favor, my example being in the Hannibal chapter actually, but it's not him because he's bad. Near the end of the chapter, you push forward to take Thracia's capital, but throughout part 2 you've been told that despite the despot leading the country, they are an extremely proud people who will absolutely fight tooth and nail to protect their homeland. And then when you get to the capital, that's exactly what happens. Tons of enemies burst out, their last stand being one massive push to take you out and seize your castle. This pushes you to scramble for any last idea you have in order to end the fight quick. Maybe you should warp someone back to the home base, or you could notice that the base boss is separate from the castle, meaning you can rush in and capture it. Or you can make a sacrifice play, which will make him call back all of his forces. This is an example of what these random difficulty spikes could have always been like, because not only is it something that aids in the game's unique map design, but also matches the story. It tries to do that later with Julius and Ishtar seeing who can kill you first, and when you take out one, they both leave, but that comes with a massive group of sleep staff mages who will more than likely sleep the units you wanted to use to fight, meaning you're better off killing them than waiting for the sleep turns to wear off, instead of sending someone to take them out quickly. And for newcomers, this shit is just mean. You already will be learning each massive map in different ways while learning all of the mechanics just for the game to fuck you over with something you didn't expect. Actually, you know what? Now's the time. I'm gonna hit on what I think is the main reason people leave this game with a bad taste in their mouth. If someone is impatient, easily frustrated, or just not prepared and they go in blind, there's a massive chance they will despise this game. You won't know what villages you should be prioritizing. You won't know that the recruitable enemies will not only be happy to annihilate your unit, but will also run head-on into death, and oops, they're gone forever now. You won't know about the different details of the romance system, or how to check if characters can talk, or that separating your army isn't just a better way to play, but required if you don't want to constantly slog through. Most Fire Emblem games post Binding Blade are incredibly easy to pick up, understand, and have fun with. But here, most newcomers will give up, rely almost entirely on Sigurd, and have a bad time. It's so often I hear, "Oh man, FE4's story is so good! Too bad the gameplay is ass." But that isn't true. I feel like people are uninformed on what this game expects of them and how much cool stuff there is to find, and then end up not having as much fun. That's honestly a reason why I might not like part 2 as much as I should. I just don't have as much experience with it as part 1. With part 1, I'm all smiles because I have the experience. I know easy ways to plan out who's getting EXP, I know how to take advantage of the game's mechanics, and I know where I need to go for the different encounters. Meanwhile, when I first played Genealogy, I was bored out of my mind because I wasn't even aware of how the game wanted me to play. But after I finished part 1 a second time, instead of going to part 2, I decided to play part 1 again, and then I played it again later, and nowadays it's one of my favorite experiences in the series. I'm not spending 3 to 4 hours on maps anymore. At most I'm spending 1. My turns rarely go past 40. I'm able to burn through the game so much more comfortably, and this time I started having that experience with part 2 as well, which is what really led me to the biggest strength and weakness of the game. It needs to be played multiple times. I mean it. I can't believe how much more fun this game is, both parts, when you have more experience with it under your belt. And this isn't like Thracia or Engage, where it's more fun with more of the series under your belt. I mean more experience with this game specifically. The more you play, the less the difficulty spikes ambush you, the more fun you have when planning out routes, the more enjoyable every unit becomes, and the easier item management and the weirder mechanics get. But expecting someone to replay a game they may not have enjoyed to begin with is a very tough sell, especially because this game is long, man. It's longer than most of the games in the series, and it can feel like it's dragging despite how enraptured you'll be in the story. So to pat someone on the back and say, "Hey buddy, get back in there and play it again," is just kind of a dick move. However, in my experience, that's how you're going to enjoy it, because that first run through can be rough. So here's my advice. If you want to go in blind, go ahead. But I mean, if you're this far in the video and you haven't played the game, you're obviously not going in totally blind. But honest to God, I'm sorry, comments, use a guide. Specifically, I would recommend this video by Choops, link in the description, and this website, Fire Emblem WOD's Guide on Genealogy. While it does contain step-by-step guides, what I would actually recommend looking at are these fantastically comprehensive maps that point out where to conquer, where the side objectives are in relation, and what villages have rare items. This is what you want, because I don't think you even need a step-by-step guide. It just nudges you in the right direction. Speaking of nudges, here's a few of mine. If you see enemies getting uncomfortably close to your castle, that's what warp and return are for. You can set up a very easy and quick defense. Use your dancer a lot. 4-way dances are insane and will get your foot units where they need to go. Be careful who takes the leg ring. Your dancer is a good choice, but I ended up giving mine to Jamp, who had no kids,
And I don't know if I missed something.
but because he had no kids, I didn't get it in part 2. Do not be afraid to use Sigurd and Oife plenty. Despite them being pre-promotes, they are always useful throughout the entire game and they will never fall off. And they can always set up kills or tank on enemy phase. Spam speed up. It is basically a necessity, and it can also make the viewing experience worse for someone watching your video on YouTube. And finally, use Julia. Get her to a decent level. I remember when I first played, I thought she'd be like Deirdre and leave the party, so I didn't use her. Then when she did leave, I thought I was a genius until, yeah, she comes back. And not only that, she is basically mandatory to kill the final boss. Hey, it's that thing I mentioned that Kaga does where the difficulty is from the game not telling you things. Genealogy is a very weird Fire Emblem. It tried a lot of things and is so different that if a game takes any aspect from it, that's a sign of a remake to the fan base. But legitimately, every game in the series takes from it. Obviously, Three Houses takes the most, but none of them are just like Genealogy. The only game that's just like Genealogy is itself. And that's both intimidating and in a lot of ways has created kind of a form of elitism. If you don't enjoy the game, you just don't get
Yes,
it.
indeed.
And I don't think that's fair. But what I will ask of you is that if you didn't like it the first go around or you're having trouble getting into it, give it another shot. This game isn't like normal Fire Emblem, so all that I can ask is that you don't go in expecting a normal Fire Emblem. And that goes for if the game gets a remake too. I get that everyone is saying it's inevitable, but people have been saying that it's inevitable since Echoes. And I don't want to alarm you, but that game is 8 years old in less than a month. I'd love a remake, and I'm sure that if we do get one, much more of the mechanics will be explained, it'll be much more accessible to American players, and you know what, it is
Begging to be fully voice acted.
However, as far as we know, there isn't a remake, and until we see a trailer or an announcement, there isn't going to be one. So the best way to experience it is in its original form. And you should. I know I've spoiled quite a bit of it, but the story has a lot more to experience and I barely scratched the surface. These characters are so interesting, and even if I don't think part 2 is as good, it's still a fantastic way to close out the story and develop the world even further. It's not perfect, especially on your first run, but it is still one of a kind and very much worth playing. And to close out, I think I want to reiterate that we just don't have another game like this. Fire Emblem has a formula now, a really good one and one that's created games that I like better, but not only is this game unique as an outlier, but it's the best example of what Fire Emblem once was. Again, I'm not saying that what we have is worse now, it's not, but if it continued as it was back during Genealogy's time, we wouldn't see this series as Nintendo's signature turn-based strategy game. We'd maybe see it similarly to the works of Suda51, Yoko Taro, or Hideo Kojima. Shozo Kaga was very dedicated to innovating his series. At times it really bit him in the ass, but here it created a landmark RPG, one that I think would be worshipped if it came out in the States. And I hope it eventually does get a legitimate release. But my main hope is that you play it,
And enjoy it.
while you do that, I'm never coming back.